Your problem is that we are independent and that we do not accept the Epstein class that rapes and murders little kids.
Okay.
We don't
if I may
accept
respond,
them murdering
if I may
our
respond,
kids. We will not allow your regime to kill our kids and get away with it.
Welcome back, everyone. In this episode, we'll be watching a program discussing Islam, America, and Iran, hosted by Piers Morgan. He brings in speakers from various backgrounds, including a Jewish female journalist and an Iranian spokesperson. The funny thing is, Piers Morgan, who should be a moderate, is forced to take sides when confronted by Professor Morandi, who is fiercely debating him. So how as it goes? Stay tuned for more.
Most regular people I've talked to, be it in London, in New York, in Sydney, wherever it may be, they kind of think, look, the Iranian regime is awful. The Ayatollah was a terrible, tyrannical person. He repressed his people. Clearly, Iran has sponsored terrorism throughout the region. There's kind of unanimity about that aspect of this. But they're not necessarily buying in, according to all the polling, and I'd be worried if I was Donald Trump about this, that they're not buying into the imminent threat that Iran was posing, not least because last summer we had a 12-day war in which we were informed afterwards Iran's ability to develop a nuclear bomb had been pretty well decimated. Yet here we are, just 8 months later, with apparently an immediate pressing need to go into full-blown war with Iran because of the impending imminent threat of them creating a bomb, a nuclear bomb. And people are like, well, how can those two things be true?
I think it's hard for people to buy into the case for war when it's such a transparent crime and the pretext is so incoherent. The Trump administration in recent days has given us so many different explanations. First, they claimed that there was intelligence of an imminent threat to U.S. troops in the region. Then, when the Pentagon briefed Congress, they had to admit that that was not true. Then Marco Rubio said the other day that, well, we knew that Israel was going to attack, and if Israel attacks, then Iran would retaliate against our forces. So to protect our forces, we had to strike first. And then that was immediately walked back because who signed up to go to war for Israel? And Trump even admitted that that was a lie when he said that he struck first because he thought that Iran was going to attack, which is also a lie because the Trump administration has been lying the whole time. They lied when they went to these negotiations last week in Geneva. They told the Iranians, and I know this from sources who were there, the Omani foreign minister who brokered this has also confirmed this. They told the Iranians that they were okay to just discuss the nuclear issue. And on that front, Iran was totally accommodating. Just as Iran respected the Iran nuclear deal that was reached back in 2015, which even the Trump administration in its first term had to certify that Iran was respecting, Iran also was willing once again to have a new JCPOA that would have resolved the nuclear issue. And Wickoff and Kushner pretended as if that was okay. Meanwhile, though, the Trump administration's real goal, which they've been planning for months with Israel, is regime change because Iran insists on the right to defend itself from Israeli aggression. That's why the issue of Iran's ballistic missiles has been such a big issue, because Iran can defend itself. And Iran is among a small number of states that stands up to U.S.-Israeli hegemony in the region. And that's why, from the point of view of the Trump administration, they had to go. And that's why they lied us into another disastrous regime change war that threatens, just as the Iraq war did, to blow up the region. It's already caused so many casualties. We have to stress one of the first victims of this assault, this aggression, was a girls' school in Iran, where around 165 children were killed. And we all know the U.S. and Israel did it. They haven't denied doing it, which to me is confirmation that they were behind this. And there's many more people who will lose their lives simply because Israel and the U.S. couldn't accept diplomacy. They couldn't accept a peaceful way to resolve an issue that really wasn't an issue because Iran didn't even have a nuclear weapons program, as Trump's own intelligence community asserted just 1 year ago.
Emily Schrader, let me just talk to you here about, I remember when Vladimir Putin invaded Ukraine 4 years ago, there was, a lot of general consensus that this was a despicable, illegal invasion of a sovereign democratic country and he should be repelled, right? But don't the validity of that argument, doesn't that get damaged if Israel and America just decide to unilaterally attack Iran? Doesn't it send a message to China that if they want to go and take Taiwan, well, they can now do so? They just have to present a case that they feel in peril, they feel under threat, as Putin said about Ukraine. In other words, if international law just gets completely ignored and shredded, as it has been here, clearly, then where does that leave the world? Where does it leave us when people that America would view as very bad actors in the world stage use the same arguments to get what they want?
Well, I obviously understand your point, but I think it's a bit insulting to Ukraine to compare them to the Islamic regime in Iran. This is not a democratic state. It's a terrorist state.
I'm not comparing the regimes. I'm comparing the decision-making by those that attack and the way the world responds.
Fair point. Fair point. I'll give you that. But I don't think it's at all the same thing. I think it's comparing apples and oranges. I think that this is in coordination, in adherence to international law under Article 51 of the UN. And I think that it's that this regime has posed a clear and present danger to U.S. troops for many, many decades. I mean, their entire ideology is built on this concept of death to America. One of their first actions that they did was to take over the U.S. embassy and hold hostages for 444 days. You know, when you want to talk about hegemony, look at what the Islamic Republic has done in this region. They are the expansionist power. They are the ones who are destabilizing the entire region. That Islamic regime is responsible for more deaths of Arab Muslims than any other single entity or organization in the Middle East. They're responsible for Hezbollah. They're responsible for the terror proxies in Iraq. They're responsible for the destabilization and terror proxies, including building IRGC bases in Syria. They're responsible for the Houthis in Yemen and launching a terrible, bloody civil war that happened there. Of course, they're responsible for Hamas and Islamic Jihad in Gaza that have completely destabilized Palestinian society and kept it stagnant from progressing. So there's a lot of things on the table here, a lot of examples of how this regime has expanded their influence, and that is by design. The ideology of the Islamic Revolution, the concept of it was to export the revolution. Those are their words, not mine. And that is exactly what they have done through their terror proxies and their efforts overseas. And it's not just the Middle East either, which is something that presses, or I rather makes the case for the military operation now. This is also in Europe. We know that the UK, for example, has been used in a way as a playground for money laundering for the IRGC. They have carried out assassinations and attempted assassinations, as well as attempted kidnappings on European citizens on European soil. And they've also done the same in the United States with the attempted kidnapping of Masih Alinejad. They've also attempted to carry out assassinations in Washington, D.C. It is not contained to the territory of Iran, and that precisely is the problem. Every action that Israel has taken has been in defense to the aggression and the attempt to eradicate the state of Israel, but also the entire West. And so this idea, this fantastical notion that everything they've done is somehow just in response to whatever the West has done or whatever the United States has done, it's delusional. It's absolute nonsense.
Omar, your response to what Emily said there?
Sure. I mean, I'll address a couple of things. On that note, I think that's absolutely important, just to put things in perspective, of the fact that at this point, 6 Americans have been killed, and they did not die honorable deaths defending their own nation or homeland. Their lives were wasted by Donald Trump because he is fighting this war of choice, this illegal act of aggression, in order to help his buddy Netanyahu, who is, by the way, a wanted war criminal, wanted by the International Criminal Court, to help him play emperor of the Middle East. That's what American lives are being wasted for. And frankly, when it comes to the school as well, all available evidence right now points to the fact that this was a strike either by the United States or Israel. There's been multiple investigations, including by Al Jazeera, on it that I think is worth checking out. So we're dealing with a reality where right now, more than 1,000 Iranians have been killed, their lives completely destroyed, where you have these girls in that school will never grow up to become teenagers, and their parents will never see them again. And for what? In order for Netanyahu to play emperor of the Middle East. That is what we're fighting for. And there are endless lives that are going to be taken in the near future, not just in Iran, but in neighboring Arab countries and in Israel and American troops. This war is a moral abomination, and there's no way to defend it. And I just have to comment on the chutzpah that Emily just displayed, talking about Iran as an expansionist country at a time when Israel is illegally occupying the Palestinian territories, the West Bank, Gaza, and East Jerusalem, illegally occupying a massive part of Syria that has expanded since the Syrian government has fallen, even though the new government is bending over backwards telling Israel that they're going to protect them and do whatever they want, and occupying parts of South Lebanon, refusing to end them. Israel is literally physically expanding on the ground in contravention to international law, and they are the dominant, most significant terrorist regime in the entire region. And just on that note, I want to address Matt's moral confusion here. is that he seems to be under the impression that an Israeli regime that is engaged in illegal occupation, has a system of apartheid, engaged in genocide in Gaza, is allowed to have illegal weapons, including nuclear weapons, but how dare Iran on the other side have conventional weapons because he views them as a threat? International law doesn't mean anything unless it applies to everybody equally. Rules don't mean anything unless they apply to everyone. And if you judge by that double standard of saying people that we like get to do whatever they want, commit whatever crimes they want, and have whatever weapons they want, but people that we don't like don't get to, then that is just an elementary moral hypocrisy, and it is not a roadmap for stability. You play in a world in which might makes right and you can do whatever you want. That is a recipe for eternal conflict and eternal death. It is simply not morally coherent to want to live in that kind of world.
How can Iran possibly expect to withstand the United States military before we involve the Israelis? So do you accept that militarily this can only end one way if Iran continues to react the way that it's done, particularly if, as it brings in all the other Gulf states and is attacking all its neighbors, as Iran has been doing, actually it's achieving the opposite of what it would have hoped to have done. It's rallying the Gulf states behind Israel and America.
Well, first of all, these Gulf Arab family dictatorships, they host U.S. bases, and those bases are being used against Iran. So they are complicit in the murder of Iranians. They can't have their cake and eat it too. They cannot be a part of aggression and say that we are neutral. With regards to the number 40 that you say, that is American propaganda. The White House is always saying all sorts of nonsense. Far less people were killed this time round than last time round. The leader, Ayatollah Khamenei, he was martyred because he stayed at home. And he said, I'm not leaving my office and my home because many Iranians have nowhere to go, and so I cannot leave. And he chose to stay, even though everyone knew that he would be a primary target. Unlike your leaders and the Epstein class in your country, which do all sorts of things to ordinary people, he stood with his people, and he stayed with his people. And that's why he's so popular. And unlike the propaganda that we see on your show all the time with these insane pundits who've never been to Iran, who know nothing about Iran, who just repeat these Epstein class talking points, the Iranian people are steadfast and standing beside and behind the Islamic Republic. And as we speak, across Tehran, under missile fire, you see huge crowds of people in different parts of the city protesting against the United States and calling for the armed forces to resist. And might does not make right. As I learned from school, children know this. We are in the right. Your regime, your government, the American regime, they supported the Holocaust in Gaza, the ongoing Holocaust in Gaza. We stood against it.
Okay, the point I would make.
No matter how.
Let me respond. Let me respond.
No matter how you try to frame it and pretend that we killed in Iran tens of thousands of people on the streets and all that fake media propaganda, the reality is the reason why Iran is hated is because we're against ethnic cleansing. We're against ethno-supremacism. And that is something that the Epstein class that rules over all of you cannot tolerate.
Well, no Epstein class rules over me. And the difference between me and you is I'm able to look at our leadership, from our Prime Minister to our former UK ambassador to America to the former Prince Andrew, and I'm able to publicly criticise them and say I find all of them, frankly, pretty deplorable and shameful to their country in the way they conduct themselves. You would never say that about your supreme leader, because had you said that on the airwaves...
How do you know?
Well, hang on, because had you called your supreme... Let me explain to you. Yeah, if you let me I'll let you speak. Let me speak. Had you criticised your supreme leader while he was alive publicly, had you done it publicly in the way that I can do about my prime minister or my royal family or my ruling political class, then you would have disappeared from the airwaves extremely quickly. You and I know that. And when it comes to the reaction of the people on the street in your country, you would like everyone to believe it's all one way. Everyone's on the side of the regime that you've propped up for years. But I would show you this scene. Look at this and tell me what we're looking at. It looks like people to me celebrating the toppling of a statue of your dead supreme leader.
Wow, look at those millions of people on the streets. Stunning. Why don't you show the crowds that are 100 times larger in small cities than these crowds? Because you cannot do that. Because in order to remain on air, you have to pursue certain narratives. But if you were at my university and you were in my classroom, you would see students with all sorts of views saying whatever they want. A student would say, Iran is worse than North Korea. And I would laugh at him and make fun of him in a friendly way till the end of the semester. But you have this alternative Iran somewhere in the universe in your mind. And based on that, all your assessments are made.
Okay, well, criticize your regime then. Okay, well, criticize your regime then. If you've got such freedom of speech, criticize your regime right now. Go on.
Pierce, if
yeah,
you
you
were
can't,
in Iran,
can you?
Pierce,
you're full of hot air. You remind me of Comical Ali in the Iraq War, who kept just talking complete nonsense about his ruling, about his regime and ruler.
I'm at a, the problem is I don't know how to deal with your. Be quiet for a second and let me respond.
Well, criticize your regime. Go on.
I know you're afraid. Be quiet. Let me respond.
I'm not afraid of anything.
Don't be so afraid. In Iran, we talk against the government, against policies day and night. You sit in a taxi. They're criticizing. You're on campus. They criticize.
I wanted you to criticize your regime right now.
No, I'm not going to. When you give me 5 minutes. No,
you're not going to, are you? Because you're a coward. And you're a paid up stooge of the regime. And you know if you do criticize them, they'll take you off the airwaves. Your job is to get on the airwaves and promote the regime. That's why you can't criticize them.
Yeah.
And if you could criticize them, you would.
Are you going to let me talk, or are you just too cowardly to let me talk? You're afraid of me.
I asked you a question. You wouldn't do it.
You're a coward.
You can't do it, can you?
You're a coward. I'm the coward.
I can criticize my regime. I can tell you, I think Prime Minister Starmer has been a complete dud. What are you going to say about your regime?
My country is under airstrikes from your criminal regime, your Epstein regime. My country, the people in my city are being slaughtered by your garbage regime, and you want me to sit here?
Actually, the people in your country were slaughtered by your regime, weren't they? Only a few weeks ago, up to 30,000 of your people were slaughtered by your regime, weren't they?
Okay, Pierce, forget it. If you don't want me to talk, I'll just sit down. You do the talking.
Well, I tell you what, we'll end it like this. I've had you on my show many, many times, right? When do I get invited on Iranian state television? Ah, you've gone.
I invited you to Iran, Pierce. I invited you to Iran.
I'll do it like you do. I'll do it like you do. Down the barrel of a camera, you put me on Iranian state television and let me say what I think about Iranian state television in the way that I let you come on my show and criticize my country and the United States and the West. Fair's fair, right, Professor? Because you've got freedom of speech in Iran. There should be no problem in me, Piers Morgan, going on Iranian state television and hammering your regime. Only you won't let that happen, and the regime won't let it happen, because amongst the many things that you repress, the biggest thing you repress is freedom of speech. That's why you can't talk out against your regime, and that's why you wouldn't let me go on state TV in Iran and talk out against your regime. And that is the difference between us. So you can try and take the high moral ground, but the reality is that is the difference.
You are a genocide supporter. You supported it in Israel, in Palestine, and you refused to come to Iran. and I invited you twice.
I literally did the opposite, actually. I literally did the opposite.
And
you should watch Uncensored more often.
On your regime TV, you don't even let me talk. You don't know anything about Iran, and you just talk and talk and talk, and you're afraid of me saying a single sentence. Iran is being bombed by your regime. Our children are being slaughtered. As we speak, your regime is bombing my country, and your regime sent in intelligence, the Israeli Mossad, the CIA, according to the former head of the CIA, according to the Mossad itself, they sent in people to infiltrate. According to Channel 14 of Israeli TV, which is close to Netanyahu, they brought in weapons that killed hundreds of police officers and volunteers on the streets. So the 3,117 people who were killed, and all of them have their ID and information, they're well known. If you have any extra names, give them to me and let's see what your evidence is. All of those people are recognized. And wait a moment. Wait a moment. And if there was one police officer killed in your country, what would the reaction be? Some young woman was turning to the right. They shot her in the face. Here they killed 200 police officers and well over 100 volunteers on the streets. And you call that peaceful protest, but you ignore the millions of people on the streets as we speak in Tehran right now.
Yeah, let me tell you.
And
let me respond. I can tell you.
I wanted to bring something for you to see, but forget it. Just one final sentence. For 47 years, you have been, your government, your regime, your media has been saying Iran is unpopular. Iran is about to fall. The regime is collapsing. And it never happened. And do you know what? That is exactly the same thing that your media and your governments would say about Mossadegh. When he was in power, they were saying he's evil, he's criminal, he's corrupt. Go and look at the New York Times, the Washington Post. It's always the same. Your problem is that we are independent and that we do not accept the Epstein class that rapes and murders little kids. We don't accept them murdering our kids. We will not allow your regime to kill our kids and get away with it.
Okay, I mean, I understand. But I would say in return that your regime, the Iranian regime for the last 47 years, has waged systematic, barbaric repression against its own people, suppressed free speech. It has killed thousands of protesters. You say, what would happen if it happened here? Let me tell you, if thousands of protesters got shot dead in the street of Britain, the people responsible would be brought down from power extremely quickly. And the Iranian regime has also sponsored terrorism all over the Middle East, from the Houthis to Hezbollah to Hamas. But you consistently deny that because you're comical ally. You're the guy they put up on TV to say, the sky may look blue to you, but you know where I am, it's green. And that's the problem. But Professor, it's always good to have you on Uncensored. And the truth is, I let you come on here and you can say what you want to say, but you never, ever let me on state TV in Iran. I look forward to my first invitation. Why don't you get me on, have a word with the regime and get me on state TV tomorrow, down the barrel of a camera like you, and I'll say what I think of the regime on state TV in Iran. Have we got a deal?
Come to Iran. Don't be cowardly and come to Iran.
Oh, well, you come to London then. Get on a plane.
You come here. You want to see? You want to see state TV?
I thought so.
Come to Iran.
Let the record show. Let the record show. I can't go on state TV like this, like you do, because you won't let me. And secondly, that I've given you repeated chances to criticize your regime, and you have bottled it because you know what would happen if you did. Professor Morandi. No, I'm going to leave it.
Come to Iran, and you and I will debate on Iranian TV.
Yeah, you come to London, and we'll have a chat. I will do that. Good to talk to you, Professor.
I will do that, Piers. I will do that.
Great.
You come to Iran.
Great. I'll see you in London.
I will show you around the buildings that you helped justify the slaughter of all these women and children. But after that, I'll take you to Press TV and have a debate with you in studio where it will be broadcast and everyone can see it.
Perfect.
Fine? Is that good?
Perfect. Yeah. but I'll do it the way you do it, down the barrel of a camera. Professor Morandi, thank you for joining me. I appreciate it.